The following program contains the opinions of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. Coming to you cordless from Minneapolis, everybody. It's Tuesday night, August 12th, 2025. I am Jim Peters, and welcome to another edition of Jim Peters Tonight. Will I ever get this right, ever? Probably not. Hope you guys had a good day today. I took a shower. I thought you'd want to know. Cleaned my hair. I was looking at the playback last night. I thought, I look like I had dirty hair. For years, there was first year we did this, was a guy who was always sending me text messages saying, "You wash your hair." Well, I did. Okay. Our guest tonight is Bruce Solheim. Now, Bruce is an author. He's, for lack of a better term, he's a UFO experiencer, although that barely covers what he's got going on. But we'll just like leave it at that. And he's a professor of history at Citrus College in Glendora, California. Now, he's been communicating with an extraterrestrial named Anzar since he was an adolescent. And this goes on, and my impression is, I mean, he can tell you, I think he talks to Anzar at about a weekly basis, maybe. And so he's experienced quite a few things. And so we have to, we're going to talk to him about a lot. This is his third time on the show. And I have to tell you this, that he was just on a couple months ago. And this is still one of the weirdest goddamn things. So we did this show, I think it was on June 6th, if I'm right. Went fine, terrific, fantastic. We broadcast this show live on 6 platforms. And it automatically records archives on all 6 platforms automatically. We send the stream, they broadcast it live. As soon as the stream is done, it gets posted as a recorded file, right? Got that? On all 6 of those platforms, the file was blank. And here's the real kicker. On the local copy, we make a local backup here in our studio. That file was blank too. I can't explain this. Now, Bruce suggested that it might have been because at the start of that interview, we played an AI rendition of a song he wrote that was recorded via AI, and that somehow that might have tripped some filters somewhere in the whole Googleplex universe. I have no idea. He may be right about that. But actually, the more I think about this, especially considering the fact our local file was not working either, I don't quite understand this. And we got to talk to him about this because he's had some, he's kind of glossed over this in the past, but he's had some strange things happen about going on podcasts and stuff. And so we want to talk to him about that. He's joining us tonight. Tomorrow night, Tim Conaway, our old friend, former executive editor of Hustler magazine. He was the editor of Hustler in its heyday in the 80s and 90s. And he's always got entertaining stories about the world of journalism years by. And it was way more entertaining. Sometimes I think that this whole technology thing, it's just really, it's cramping our style. I don't know if life is getting more fun. I really don't. And we got some, I'm going to talk about that in part 2. We're going to do a little gym cast after Bruce is done. I got something I want to mention about that also. We're taking Thursday night off. We're also taking next Thursday night off too. We're taking Thursday night off. We'll be running a rerun. Don't know what it is yet. We always run reruns on Friday nights. That's the deal. Best of. I'm like Carson. I'm working 3 days a week. It's terrible. If you want to call this work. On Monday, the 18th, that's this coming Monday, Don Zur, our old friend, will be joining us. Don, you people like Don. He gets really good numbers and a lot of feedback. And we're starting to finally, after 2 years, we're starting to get some reasonable views on YouTube. I think they were throttling us, shadow banning us for, like, the first year. I really do, and that's because when we did a whole series when we started here on climate change, which I still feel very strongly about, that it's basically a political hoax, and I had a bunch of scientists on and stuff like that, and we got flagged, and it's like nobody was watching for about a year at least. But finally, I just noticed this. Our numbers on YouTube are picking up. Anyway, I brought that up because Don did. We actually ran. Don was last time. Don comes on about once a month, and so last time he came on, he couldn't do it, and we ran a rerun of his previous appearance, and even the rerun got really good numbers. He's very entertaining, and also Jonathan Lockwood's going to be joining us, former U.S. Army colonel, expert in world relations, and where he's coming on Monday because this weekend Trump is meeting Putin in Alaska, and I'm curious to see what Jonathan thinks about all that. Jonathan it's very interesting. He does a podcast, weekly podcast with two other guys. But the real interesting thing about the podcast is that one of the guys is actually in Ukraine, and the whole podcast is about the Ukrainian war. And they're doing bang up business because of the unique nature of what they got going on there. So anyway, he's a former U.S. Army colonel. I keep telling everybody, Fox News says General Keane. We got Colonel Lockwood. So that's Monday. That's Monday night. Tuesday, Wednesday next week. We don't really know what's going on yet. It's kind of up in the air. But anyway, we're taking next Thursday off, and then also the last week of August we're taking off. And with that, let's play a 12-second bumper, and we're going to put BRUCE SOLHEIM on. Here we Joining us from his home in Glendora, California, the dashing, handsome, and dapper BRUCE SOLHEIM. Hi, Bruce.
Well, yeah, boy, oh boy, that's laying it on thick there, Tim. But that's very, very nice of you to say that. Now that I'm
all right, you do have great hair.
it's still there. It's my mom's side of the family. My dad was bald at 22. So, yeah, so that I got the luck of genetics there. And,
so now I kind of lost track here, and I was telling you before we came on that I was on Amazon. You have over a dozen books, right? They're in publishing.
Yeah, I got 18 books. 18 books.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I thought it was about 14. We are 18, and the two latest that I have here both came on in April was Gig Line, which is kind of an autobiography of yours, and your Dr. Jekyll Alien Hunter series #2, right?
Yeah, and just before that was We Are the Aliens. So yeah, I've been publishing a lot, and Gig Line is a kind of unique. It's a comic book autobiography, so it's my autobiography told in comic book stories.
Yeah. So I know. Can I ask you? I know there's the term graphic novels, but if they're nonfiction books, is there a term? What are they? Graphic nonfiction? What are they called?
There's not a generally agreed upon term. So I asked my friend Gary Dumm, who's been in the comic business since the 70s. He worked with Harvey Pekar and American Splendor, and out of Cleveland there, and he still lives in Cleveland. Gary Dumm. I asked him, what do I call it? Because he contributed a couple of the stories, and we decided between the both of us. He said a comic book autobiography is the best description, and maybe that's a whole new thing.
You invented the genre.
Maybe so. Harvey Pekar's American Splendor was autobiographical, So,
and Dr. Jekyll Alien Hunter is a graphic novel, right?
That's a graphic novel, yeah. And it's a series, and so is Snark at this point too, because they're larger than comic books. So once you get over 60 pages, I think you're technically into graphic novel territory there.
Yeah. And are you using the same artist for all of them?
I do for Dr. Jekyll Alien Hunter. It's the Polish artist named Julia Kazanowska. She's only 22 years old and she's brilliant already. If I waited too long, I couldn't afford her. She's already going up
Yeah.
in price with demand,
Right.
And then Gary Dumm does all the or all the Snark comics, and he's also illustrated several of my paranormal books. And yeah, so I've been working with him for a while. Oh, there's also a history book that came out recently too. I don't know if you can see it behind me. It's called "I'm an American," a personal approach to early American history. So I got 2 history books recently in the last few years,
And
so I can use them as textbooks.
how early is early? Like what time period?
From the early, migration into the Americas. So you start there and you end at the Civil War, basically. So
Okay,
that's a lot of history to cover.
yeah, and you teach this, and I'm gonna get
Yeah.
off topic for a little second there.
Mhm.
Okay, so yeah, and I understand the decolonizers and that we stole land from the Indians, and we did,
Mhm.
but I guess my feeling is, well, it's too late, isn't it?
Well, yeah, there's the practical, and then there's the emotional response, and there's the historical response. And I think that everybody at a certain point is taking something from somebody. And whether it was
Yeah,
Native American tribes, there were some that were very warlike and grabbed a lot, So I think the best way was put, I can't remember her name. She works at the Smithsonian. She's a Native American. And she said that there's a misconception about Native American history, that everything Native Americans did was beautiful and glorious, and kind of the noble savage myth,
right.
and some of it was, but some of it was awful. I mean, just
Yeah,
awful stuff, slavery and human sacrifice, and other, whether if you go into Mesoamerica, right? So I mean, it's a mixed bag. So it really comes down to who has the power, who has the desire, the will to power to grab things. And it's unfortunate that it did happen that way, but you just try to do the best you can and acknowledge, I mean, I owe a lot to Native American stories, and especially as it relates to aliens or
yeah,
terrestrials. And I've met several in my life that have given me guidance. Some have saved my life, like up in Alaska, a guy named Willie, who's a Inupiat, or Eskimo, as we call it in the lower 48. He saved my life from being killed by a polar bear. I had no clue. I was up in Barrow, Alaska, just wandering around at midnight on the beach, and the ice flows all the way up to the beach. And he called me up to his up on this sand dune kind of thing, and started telling me stories. And he said, "No, by the way, that there was a polar bear about 100 yards away from you behind that chunk of ice, and he was about to come after you." So yeah,
God,
from saving my life to telling me stories. And that just to continue with that, because it was so amazing. I found out he was a Vietnam veteran, so he had some very sad stories to tell. My brother, who died in Christmas in 2023, Vietnam vet as well. And I just happened to meet a lot of Vietnam vet. They'd come up and talk to me. I guess they know that maybe they know I teach the Vietnam class, or I would listen to them. But anyway, he
you've written a
told
book
me,
on that too, right?
yeah, I've written about it. There's a story in I think in Gigline about it, but also his he talked like a mystic. He was so amazing. He was absolutely amazing. He was almost unreal. And then the next day, and then we went our separate ways. He stayed there. Next day, I had a host who was also Inupiat, a lady, and I told her, "Hey, I met Willie, over by the beach. He saved my life." And she said, "You met Willie?" And I said, "Yeah, I met Willie. What's the You talked to Willie?" And I said, "Yeah, she was like, and she didn't explain why she was so flabbergasted. It's like, why wouldn't he talk to me? I got the idea that maybe Willie was not among us.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah,
Was Willie is what you would call dead?
yes.
Yeah,
I think it was the ghost of Willie, and maybe
yeah,
he did die in Vietnam, and he was there still, because the first thing he said was he didn't say there's a polar bear. He said, "Where you are standing was once our old village." And I thought,
Uh-huh.
that's a weird way to start a conversation. But anyway,
It is.
and then the reaction the next day of that lady was like, "How did you talk to Willie?" She didn't say he was a ghost, but I did
Yeah.
some research and tried to find out, and I couldn't find anything about him. So it's like an unspoken or spoken maybe just among the locals about Willie. I don't know.
Well,
Uh,
it's so strange how that
yeah,
works because a lot of apparitions like are truly like
mhm,
traditionally ghost-like, where you see like something that looks like mist or whatever, and then many people, and I have to say, even my wife has seen one, has seen a
yeah,
ghost that will look completely real. She
yeah,
did not real, somebody had to tell her later that person did not exist.
yeah,
So, it's
yeah.
like,
It was, yeah, it was, so, and I've had, when I was a kid at the Puyallup Fair up in Washington State, they had a Wild West show, kind of like the old Buffalo Bill thing, and a
mhm,
rodeo. And Roy Rogers was there. That was fun. But anyway, I met the Native American. He came up to me, and I was acting a fool as a little kid. I had, my cowboy get up with the 6 shooters, and I
yeah,
was acting like a brat and stomping around. And he comes up to me and he just says, "Boy," um, I'm trying to remember exactly what he said. "Walk quietly and with purpose upon the earth." And then he walked away. And I remember him saying that, and I was just like, "Whoa." I
yeah,
didn't, he just gave me a lesson right there. Walk
right,
quietly and with purpose upon the earth.
right.
Because I was acting a fool. So
Yeah, I could also make another come up with another theory, and that is,
yeah.
I think Bruce, you're kind of a special soul, and I think other special souls can see that sort of thing.
I
Even when you're a little kid, even if
yeah,
you're a little kid,
I think and that could be, maybe he wasn't of this world either,
yeah,
because he was very traditional. I just figured he was part of the Wild West show, because he
right,
was very traditional looking. But I've had other experiences too. But I feel very close to Native Americans, and I've had friends over the years, and for the most part, those experiences have been pretty good. But so anyway, yeah, it's an unfortunate part of history. It has to be dealt with. There's the good, bad, and the ugly. In history, so you got to deal with all of it and put it into perspective, and try to judge if you must judge, judge people in the past in the context of their times.
yeah,
Uh, so because I sure hope people do that for us someday when they come back. People are all up in arms 100 years from now because we were eating hamburgers or something. Who knows what?
yeah.
I don't know. It's going to be something. It's
I
going to be something.
I
It's
just
going to
had
be.
somebody on the show the other night. I can't remember who it was now. It all blends together. I'm not eating bugs. Sorry, I'm not going there.
Yeah.
That could
I
happen.
Yeah. I have an aversion to that too. People say, "Oh, it's great protein." Well,
Oh, yeah, right. That's terrific. You did say something, though, earlier about the fact that, offhand, you were saying that basically everybody need to take something from everybody, and,
yeah.
I do a lot of reading, research, especially on alien abductions, and I'm
Mhm.
really curious, always, and I think somebody should actually collect these in a book
Mhm.
about what aliens tell their abductees, because, the general I don't have to tell you, the general way this works generally, I'm making a generalization here, is that, people are abducted and then they have medical experiments performed on them. But usually after the experiments are done or after the quote unquote business is over, the aliens seem to warm up. And a lot of times they will take questions from their captors. And people
Yeah.
ask people all sorts of stuff. And
Mhm.
I've noticed recently that the message, and I think maybe you indirectly have also with Anzar, what I've been reading, going to this too, is that the message is ultimately optimistic. You know, and
Yeah.
and and also there's the other thing too, and in a lot of your writings you reference Star Trek, and you're absolutely right. I don't know what the hell Roddenberry had going on, what was it, breakfast or whatever, but
Yeah.
he predicted so many things. It's mind-boggling. It
Mhm.
really is. There's just a story out just yesterday on Popular Science or something like that about the fact that they're really starting to nail this warp drive thing that they've been
Yeah.
calling for like 50 years. Now they think they can do it with way less electricity than they thought they
Yeah.
needed. So
Yeah.
even that's coming around. But at any rate, the one thing that always struck me is in the next generation where they had those replicator machines, kind of, and Jean-Luc Picard would order his Earl Grey tea and would
Yeah.
come out of the machine, and that machine is basically an atomic printer. It's like we have
Yeah.
3D printers, and so
Right.
the thing is that machine, it basically would take a static stack of
Mhm.
subatomic particles and assemble them. And
Yeah.
in theory, that we're 200-300 years away from this, but we will probably end up doing that. I mean, it will probably work. And if you stop and think about it, at that point, humans would basically have no real physical wants. We would have no physical need,
Right.
and that's going to change society immensely. But also, like you were saying, we probably won't have to kill the buffalo. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we live in a cosmic soup, I mean, it's all the quantum world is the reality, and this is an interface that we have. So,
Yeah,
yeah, it's gonna, people will look back on us primitives, someday and maybe laugh or maybe, feel sorry for us or whatever that we didn't know what was going on. But we're on the precipice of it, I think, and listening to what experiencers have gone through, which, by the way, all these things they do in Washington D.C., and which is wonderful. They have these hearings and so forth. You notice they never have any experiencers as part of those
no,
panels, and there are plenty of military experiencers,
oh
myself
yeah,
included. My friend Terry Lovelace, another one, and many others. Bob Salas, I don't think he's been there as far as I know, but anyway, so always they say, well, we got to bring in scientists, and they have this kind of objective view. It's, well, research shows, or the case studies show, and I didn't actually see it myself, but I saw the document that whatever. Talk to the people who've actually been there and talked to these entities and interacted with them, and I think the reason they don't do it is because they know what's going to happen after that. There's not going to be, it's going to they're going to lose control of the narrative.
yeah.
And once they lose control of the narrative, we'll realize that we don't really need them as much as we think we do.
Uh,
And I always tell my students that we assume that our leaders, must be really, really smart and really on top of things, and they're just like most of us are, probably even less so.
that's
And
what I
at
was
least,
gonna say. I don't even know if they're
yeah,
average.
I they're just very, they're all, I don't care which political persuasion, they're all, pretty much megalomaniacs,
Yeah,
to run for office. It's really difficult for me to watch any politician talk because alls I hear is the subtext. I don't hear what they're saying because I figure it's just manipulation,
yeah,
whoever it is, you know, like a salesman, they're going to tell you what, they're going to sell themselves and then sell whatever the product is. But they
right.
got to sell themselves first. And that's what politicians do. So I realize we have to have a political system at this point, but I understand what young people are going through because I think my young students, they're very disenchanted with the whole thing, with everything. They don't know what to believe, and we've they've been sold a bill of goods, and they're reacting in a way that maybe doesn't make sense to us, but when you think about what they're going through and all the changes that have happened so rapidly with technology and medicine and the world in crisis and so forth, you can see where they're at that point of confusion where it's real. I'll just put it this way: when I was in my 20s, the world seemed a lot simpler. Even though I was going through a tough time, there was, some very simple, basic things that I understood, and now those things are all in question.
Well,
All the
you said the world seemed simpler. Maybe it
Yeah.
actually was simpler.
It could be, or at least our perspective on it was
Yeah,
simpler. Once you've peeled back things, it's like the whole paranormal world. Once you've had an experience, it just leads to more experiences. You can't go back. You can't put the genie back in the bottle,
right.
as the old saying goes, because now there's more than that.
Well,
And
you're talking about these not having any experiences in front of Congress. My impression, one of the reasons is that I think that a lot of people think that okay, first of all, My late friend Jazz Shaw was a regular uh, person on this program, and he pointed out that he just passed away in October. He pointed out that David Grush has never he in public he does not use the word extraterrestrial. Matter of fact, I think
No.
maybe you pointed this out in some of your
Yeah.
writings too. Right? He uses non-human or non-human intelligence, and somebody asked him why that was. Somebody noticed, and he said, "Well, we're not certain they're from other planets. They might just be from other places, or the
Yeah.
whole interdimensional thing."
Yeah.
And I think that's not brought up because it's like that's in some ways that's too much for to ask the average person, or at least the perception is it's too much to ask the average person to wrap their mind around. Because
Yeah.
first of all, does anybody even? I don't understand how the interdimensional thing works. I think it exists. I don't
Yeah.
understand how it works. Do
Yeah.
you?
I've
Or do you
I've
even-
I've tried to figure it out, and this idea that at any moment there's so many different paths, into what we call the future. There's really just all at the same time. But anyway, what I call the forks in the road of time. Every
Yeah.
decision you make puts you in a different path, and that's why
Right.
it's so hard to predict the future. I mean, sometimes people do, and it's amazing, but then their track record isn't very good, because
Right.
as Anzar always tells me, he says, predictions can be wrong, but preparations are never wrong.
Yeah.
So you can prepare for particular outcomes, but predictions, you never know which reality you're going to be in. It could be one in which a certain person was elected president, and another one where they're not.
Yeah.
And of course, that changes the course of events for everybody. It could worldwide included. But the whole idea of it all comes down to time. Our concept of time is linear, and that's not, that's the interface.
Yeah,
And
and that's really funny you should bring that up. So I was reading about some clandestine meeting where some ET was meeting with a bunch of military people from the United States, and they had scientists are asking this supposedly this ET about time, and he said, "Well, your problem," the ET says to the scientists, "Your problem is that you think time is linear," and the ET says, "No, time does exist, but it's not linear." And I thought, oh wow, that's a concept. It's like
Yeah.
and now there's this a Polish physicist. This happened like about 3 months ago. A
Yep.
Polish physicist who's come out saying that time itself is 3 dimensions. So
Yeah.
wrap your mind around that. And the interesting thing about that theory is if he's right about that, that theory basically becomes a unified theory of physics. So it solved basically all major physics problems.
Exactly. The theory of everything, as they call it.
Right. But what does 3 dimensions of time look like? I don't have a clue.
I I have no idea either, other than it is what is we are experiencing. I mean, it is the reality. It is the quantum world. That's why I always say that the spirit world, the alien world, and the quantum world are all really the same thing, and that is where you can kind of try to uh, delve into or try to grasp this idea of 3 dimensions of time. But I wanted to segue into something that we mentioned earlier. This book that I wrote called "We Are the Aliens." That comes from my friend Gene,
Yeah.
who told me that several years ago when I decided to become public about all this stuff. And he told me we are the aliens, and I've been thinking about it ever since. It's not as simple as I first thought it was, because at first when he said it, and it was in like a vision, but I was talking to him like you and I are talking, but not in this time dimension, one of these
Yeah.
other dimensions of time. And I said, Gene, do you mean like you are, like he's saying we, it's like you and some other people, you are the aliens? And he goes, no, everybody. And I still had trouble understanding it. I thought, does that mean that that we are all aliens, and that there is no, pure human or whatever, that we're all somehow, mixed together, and of cosmic brothers and sisters, and so that's the clarification that I'm getting from him as I ask him more and more about it, and that includes interdimensionals, which is this energy that we don't quite understand that David Grush was talking about. It would include future humans who are coming back and experiencing, or manipulating certain events,
Mhm.
and among others, those that are maybe that don't look like future humans, but look like other species, and I think it's all true. And that's the other thing Gene said, is it's all true. And I said, you mean like everything? And he said, yeah, it's all true. And the only way that could be true is if every possibility is already happening. Every possibility,
But
every single possibility. And that maybe approaches it. It blows my mind to even think. It kind of hurts my head when I think about it, that every possibility is true, that it's all true. That it would have to, he has to be talking about time and the dimensions of time. So, and it's something that's so beyond what we can grasp, but you can grasp it enough to know, and by what Gene said, we are the aliens and it's all true. So, and but it is a problem talking about this, going back to Gene Roddenberry. I know I'm going in a circular
oh, that's
pattern,
okay.
but
That's all right.
coming back to Gene Roddenberry. If he would have come out with an autobiography, I, Gene Roddenberry, a World War II pilot, Air Force, Army, Air Corps, whatever, have been in communication with aliens. Let's say his name is Anzar, and just for sake of argument, and he's told me all these things, and I think I'm pretty sure that we're heading towards a future where there'll be no hunger, there'll be no famine, there'll be, everybody will have enough, a place to live, a job, whatever, and we'll be interacting with other species and all. If he would have said that, I've had all these visions and been in communication with them, and phasers and cell phone,
Yeah,
what we call cell phone, people would have said the guy's a nut,
yeah, that's
you
right.
know,
They would.
like they've said so many others that have done the same
Right.
thing.
That's right.
But instead, he cleverly put it into, like, a World War II generation who were very played things pretty close to the vest. Those folks, he portrayed it as a wagon train to the stars,
Yeah,
as he called it. That's how he sold it, the wagon train to the stars. And but it was a path forward, and it was a download. Whether, and maybe it could be he wasn't aware that it was a download, or maybe he was and chose to do it fictionally, so people would take it seriously. And look at how seriously they've taken it, because he's basically made some pretty bold predictions about the future that have come true.
yeah, and
So
I also, conversely, I can't think of anything major he predicted that didn't come true too.
I know, I know.
That's the other amazing thing. I mean, his track record, you're talking about people not always being able to predict the future, but his track record is pretty damn good. You
Yeah,
know? I
I
still remember I was working as a computer programmer in the 1990s, and I
mm,
still remember what a partner of mine said, and this was around 1992. He
mhm,
said, "Someday, very soon, in the next 20 years, telephones numbers will not be attached to a location; they'll be attached to a person." And I
yeah,
said, "Oh, I predicted a lot of stuff that came true myself, and I thought,
mhm,
nah, that's bullshit. My God, he was right. Who would have
mhm,
thought that? Who would have seen that coming? You know?
yeah.
Well, if you're as old as I am, but or I don't want to lump you into that in
No,
public.
I'm right there. I'm right there. We're very close in age, as we were discussing earlier.
Yeah,
We both have birthdays coming up, so
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
But yeah, anyway, so I think that, by me, I do the fictional comic books so that people can say, well, I don't really believe he talks to Anzar, but you know what? The Snark comic book's pretty entertaining, and it's the same information
yeah.
presented in a different way. That's all.
Right, right.
And it's presented all ages, so little kids can read Snark. You can give it to your little kids, and it's safe. There's not going to be anything too objectionable, other than making people think a little differently. And it's so I did both. I could have. I mean, until 2016, when Gene came to me and told me it was time to tell my stories, I did play it close to the vest. I didn't tell a few people, very few people, what
Mhm.
was going on. And then I changed my mind, and as it turned out, 2016, 2017 was the beginning of all of that. I mean, not just me, but the New York Times and the Tic Tac videos and
Yeah,
all that stuff started coming out, and people started going, "Oh, well, maybe there's something to this." But what's weird is that you can tell people that that hey, these things are real. These UAPs, which I hate that term, but anyway, I'll use it.
I do too, and they forced it on
UFOs.
us too. That also bothers me also, but
Yeah, UFOs. I'll just say what they are, UFOs.
yeah,
And they've got people think, yeah, okay, maybe, yeah, there's UFOs, but it could also be a Chinese thing, or it could be, we're thinking in those kind of even Cold War terms, that there's this
yeah,
Cold War going on still. And it's so above and beyond what people might imagine it to be, but yet it becomes almost mundane because of the way it's treated. They'll treat it as a threat, and the only way they can treat it as a threat is to say, well, it's not alien, it's obviously some rogue element, or some other country has gotten some advanced technology and we don't know from where. And all the other governments who have crash retrieval programs and have this technology goofing around with it are doing the same thing, putting up this smoke screen. And yeah, weird things have happened to me. I don't know if I told you that a few years ago, I think it was January 2023, I was in Ohio, and I was going to be on one of these you know podcasts. I won't say
oh,
the name
hold
of
up.
it. Just
Is this a story about Jimmy, you being in the hotel before the Jimmy?
yes, yeah,
Okay, I wanted to ask you about that because the thing is,
yeah,
okay, so, you're here at a return appearance
yeah,
because all those copies of this show don't exist that we did 2 months
right,
ago. And then
right,
I'm thinking, and you even asked Anzar about it. So, well, it's probably like a technical thing or something. And I'm thinking about it, and then I'm reading in your book about this thing about, and you
yeah,
can tell the story here, but I just want to point out that it's like, how this is really weird shit that's happening to you, and how could you not be paranoid? We had 7 copies of a show that just disappeared. There's no copies of this show that exists as far as I know. I've
yeah.
and how the fuck does that happen, Bruce? It's like,
Well, I have another theory. I mean, it could be technical, but that also qualifies as somebody tampering with
yes.
stuff, and that would be technical. So I'm not trying to split hairs with Anzar, but
No, I
oftentimes
know that. I know you're not.
yeah,
I know.
but
But my point is you like, and you have to tell the story now, but this is not the only time this shit's happened to you.
no, yeah, when I was on whatever, Fade to Black, right? Fade to Black.
Yeah,
I
right.
couldn't remember the name of the show, Jimmy Church. Anyway, I was scheduled to be on there, and the night, I think it was the night before. Yeah, the night before, uh, somebody got into our hotel room. My wife and I in Toledo, Ohio, and or outskirts of Toledo, and somebody was in our room. I didn't know. I was asleep. My wife woke me up and said, "There's somebody in our room." And I looked up and I saw like a shadow go out the door, and the door closed. And I go, "Who the hell is in our room?" So I got up and ran out, opened the door in my pajamas. I opened the door, and there was a guy in a hard hat, orange vest, like a highway construction guy.
Uh-huh.
And he goes, "Oh, sorry, sorry." And I was stunned. I didn't even know what to say. I didn't ask him, like, well, how'd you get into our room? It was locked. The door was locked. Do you have a key? You know what? But then before I could even say anything, on the other side of the hallway, the door opened and there were a bunch of other guys in construction uniforms in there. And I thought, that's kind of odd. And they say, "Hey, Joe," or whatever his name was, "come on in." And he went in there and the door closed. And I was like stunned. I didn't knock on their door, and I just, okay, there was some kind of mistake or whatever. The next morning, I went down to the front desk, and I told them what happened. And they said, "Oh, we're very sorry, sir. We can, we can give you a free breakfast." I said, "No, I'm not interested in a free breakfast. I'm just telling you, who are these guys, and how did they get into my room? The door was locked." And they said, "Which room was it?" And I said, "It was right on the other side of our room, whatever it was, 304. It was on the other side, 305." And they looked up into their computer, and she goes, "There's nobody registered in that room." And I said, "No, that's where they went. All the construction. You got construction guys. They're in there all together." "Sir, there's nobody registered in that room." Well, how about the room next to it on that side and the room next to that? No, no, sir. Nobody's on any of those rooms. Nobody's registered in any of those rooms.
And of course, your room has an electronic key, right?
Yes,
Right.
yes. So you have to have, the maid can get in, the hotel manager, maybe maintenance can get in, but not the construction guys in this who are supposedly not even there.
Yeah.
So that next night I was on the show, and while I was on the show late at night, because it's 3 hours ahead, Eastern time zone in Ohio, while I was on with Jimmy Church, my wife was in the bed and sleep, and somebody got into the room again. Somebody came into the room again. She woke up and there was somebody in the room, and she yelled and screamed, and they left. Well, it was just about at the end of my time with Jimmy Church, and I came upstairs, and she said somebody was in the room again. She said it was somebody. She didn't explain, what they were dressed like. They were shadowy or whatever. And I thought, how could this be? How could what is going on here? And what I was talking to Jimmy about was what happened to my son on Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, because he worked there.
And could you explain that too?
Yeah, my son is in the Air Force Reserve. He's been in the Air Force for 25 years. He's a master sergeant, and he's in security forces, and he has a very high security clearance. And he has had weird experiences his whole time in the Air Force, but especially at Wright-Patterson. And at one point, not long before I was on Jimmy Church's show, my son and several other people showed up at the ER at the same time on base, and all of them had the same symptoms. They had weird heart palpitations. They were all in crisis, and they were all young people in the Air Force, and nobody could explain it. And he kept having tests done. Nobody could explain what had happened to him. He was tired all the time. He was fatigued. He had muscle cramps. I mean, it was, and then I said, "Did they test you for radiation poisoning?" No. I asked them to, but they wouldn't do it. They said, "No, that's not it." So they never tested him for that. And anyway, I talked to Jimmy Church about that on the show, and I don't know if that, if they knew I was going to talk about it, because I had told very few people what I was going to talk about. So I thought it was somehow connected to that. They don't want people to know what's going on at Wright-Patterson, which is obviously a hot spot for UFOs
For many years, right?
And that's where they took the materials from Roswell. They took it to
right. Yeah. Right.
So and anyway, so that happened, and I asked Anzar about it, and he said, well, after Congress started snooping around, where all these materials were being kept, they were assembling them to play a shell game. So if the congressman showed up, they could, "Oh, there's nothing here." There probably was just the week before, and they were careless, and there was a release of radiation. They didn't tell anybody. That's what Anzar told me. So which seems plausible to me, because why would all these young people be sick at the same part of the base at the same time?
Well, Bruce, I'm going to ask you. You don't have to answer, because I realize that this could possibly put you and your family in danger. But has your son ever seen any weird shit at Wright-Pat, especially working in security? You don't have to tell me what it is, but maybe yes or no.
I'm gonna put it this way: whether it was my son or somebody else, there have been people who have gotten in what do they call it, Area B, where the infamous Hangar 18, was.
Right.
over there in Area B, they have old buildings inside the shell of a new building.
Yeah, I understand that. Right.
And my son took me over there, and because he can get anywhere on base, and I was with him, and we stopped in front of this new looking building, looked like a hangar. It's huge. And I said, well, what's in there? And he said, well, nobody knows for sure. I said, well, can we get out and like look? He said, Dad, if you get out of the car, people are going to show up and wonder what you're doing, and don't be taking any pictures. And I said, okay, I won't. But back to what either him or somebody else, I'll just put it that way, they have access to the tunnels that are a tunnel system underneath Wright-Patterson. And somebody had gone in there and come up inside of one of those buildings and saw some stuff that would be considered not of this earth. So somehow because they were security forces, they did see that. But my son himself, for sure, I can say this, he had a UFO experience at Yokota Air Base in Japan, along with a partner of his. They were on duty. All the lights on the runway went out, kind of like in the old movie with Richard Dreyfuss.
Right. Close Encounter.
Yeah, this all of a sudden,
yeah,
all the light and all the building lights went out, and then their truck, the electricity, it stopped. Everything went off, and then there was this weird blackness, and then all of a sudden, everything came back up again as whatever it was passed over them. That same night, there was an entity in his room that was grabbing him, and he woke up and it, moved out of the way. So, and his status was changed after that incident. His status was changed, where all of a sudden the Air Force said, "We have no record of you being in the Air Force."
No shit, really?
Yeah, somebody went in and erased his records.
Yeah, right.
And he had to get me, and I remember he was having these problems. He got me and his mom involved. His mom, my ex, called a general there in Yokota, and somehow they got it. They figured out, I don't know what their explanation was, but he was made to sign an NDA about this whole thing. But it was more than that. It was also involved something else that I can't talk about,
right,
that the NDA was actually about. And he's never told me exactly what that is, but he's tried to get, he wants to get copies of that NDA because a lot of his medical records are missing. Similar to what's happened to the guys at Rendlesham Forest, that kind of thing.
Yeah, right.
Those guys. So he's had all those experiences. So I know that there are certain people that don't like me talking about any of this. And I've asked my son, I said, there's these whistleblowers. Why don't you come forward and just tell what you know? And, they have whistleblower protection. And he laughed when I said that. And he said, Dad, you know what happens to these whistleblowers?
Right.
He said, whenever somebody gets a chance, there's going to be an unfortunate accident, an unfortunate illness.
Yeah.
He said, I just want them to leave me alone.
Right.
And I said, okay, I get it. I'm not going to, but I hear
these stories constantly.
What are they going to do to me? They'll just, he's a crazy old professor. He should have retired years ago.
Bruce, I do have to ask you, because the thing is that that is a kind of a, you've never seen any sort of like top secret weapon or anything like that. As far as I know, anyway, you don't write about it. Most people will just say, yeah, at the best, you're a spiritualist and philosopher, and at your worst, you're a crank. And are they going to like off somebody just for philosophy?
No.
That's actually the reason I want to talk about this, is because if you took the spectrum of people who were involved in this, you'd think that your particular niche would not be of particular interest, and yet it is. That's my point.
When I cry, and this comes back to the whole idea of why everything got erased. I don't know. We talked as much as we just did now, so hopefully it doesn't get erased, about what happened to my son. But what we did talk about was, and I think you were the first one I talked to about with it, was my using Anzar to help me with remote viewing.
Yeah,
And
that's right. I
and
remember now that you mention it. I remember that. That's right.
and
Yeah.
I think that that's also plausible that a technical glitch emerged or was hastened by something as a result of that. So I I hesitate in a way to even talk about it. I've actually talked about it, I think, on one other show, and I don't think anything happened. But it could be whoever, who knows what it was. That's the only thing I could think of, other than if it was purely a technical thing. I don't buy that. I think that, yeah, Anzar is right that it was technical, but somebody interfering with which they could do. It's very easy. You don't have to be that powerful, the great and
Right.
powerful Oz, to
Yeah,
mess
but
with.
conversely though,
Yeah.
like I said, in the grand totem pole or scale of what's going on here, no offense, I would not put you near the
No.
top, which means
No.
that there's a shitload of people who are monitoring a shitload of things. That's what that
Yeah.
means, and I find that amazing. That
I Yeah, it's just it's almost unbelievable, the level of what could be the level of monitoring. But I mean, I'm not going to be afraid to talk about but I will say this, that I've never, just to make it clear if anybody's listening, I haven't signed an NDA, referring to the remote viewing job I did.
Mhm.
I didn't sign an NDA. I don't have a security clearance, active one. I've had previous ones, including a top secret, but I'm not talking about any of that stuff. I'm talking about what's happened to me as a civilian, just Joe civilian,
Yeah.
or Bruce civilian, uh, who has these strange gifts, and a friend named Anzar who can help me with remote viewing. And I felt, and I'll just do it quickly, but I felt obligated to want to use that for good. I always want to do good, because it's very easy to do not good with any kind of these kind of abilities, and people do it every day, unfortunately. But I want to do good, so I was very frustrated by the Israeli hostages, especially the American hostages. I was frustrated. I thought, if they could just get those folks out and we could get all those hostages out, maybe there could be some kind of peace that happens, and then innocent people will stop being killed and this ridiculous thing will stop. If we could just get those people out of there, and if I could help in some way. So I was able to connect with the three Americans, and Keith Siegel, and Eden Alexander, and Sagi Deklechen, those three, all Americans, and or American Israelis, and I was able to hone in on them. Not me myself, but with the help of Anzar, I located them, grid coordinates, what what building they were in, what they were seeing, how they were being treated, their medical condition, all this detailed information. And I asked a friend of mine who works in the as a contractor for one of the agencies. I won't say which one, but I said, I can help, and because I had helped him with something else unrelated to the hostage. It was like
Uh-huh.
some Iranian general who went missing after an attack, and they were looking for him, and they wanted to know where he was. And so I said, well, I can help you. I'll ask Anzar to help me. And sure enough, I was able to locate him, his condition, because they didn't know if he was alive or dead. And I gave him the information, and he said, oh, that's, yeah. A little bit later, he said, that's where he was and what's going on. And so anyway, so I said, hey, I want to help you find these hostages, get them out, and see if we can change the hearts and minds of the guards, to take it easy on them at the very least. And I got a phone call in December of last year.
07?
Yeah, of
No,
last year.
yeah, right.
And it was a person obviously using a false name, because I could tell the way they said their name, and that's not their name. It doesn't sound, it wasn't said trippingly on the tongue. You know what I mean? So, and they said, we'd like to meet. And I said, who are you and what is this about? Well, we're with the USG, with the government, and we'd like to talk to you about some information that you have. So I knew what it was about, but I didn't know, who was I going to meet. Was it a foreign intelligence agent? Was it, the bad guys? So I said, well, I would like to meet in a secure location, because they should suggested a coffee shop. And I said, no, I don't know who you are. I don't, So I said a secure location, which means a skiff, a
Yeah.
secure compartmentalized information facility. So we met at a government building that indeed was one of the agencies. So nearby, not far from here. And yeah, I couldn't have a cell phone or anything with me. I went in there, and for an hour and a half, they grilled me about exactly, and I gave them a written report with all the coordinates, everything. I gave it to them. An hour and a half later, I said, I hope you guys don't think I'm nuts, and that you're just being nice and entertaining me. And the demeanor that they had, I think if they thought I was nuts, they wouldn't have talked to me for an hour and a half
Right.
and gone over every detail of what I had written.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, I know you guys probably can't say, but if this is helpful at all, can you just send, because I had a cell phone number I was interacting with. Can you just send me a thumbs up? That's all you got to do. Just a thumbs up that said it was helpful, because I never got anything. And eventually that phone went dead. So it was a burner phone, obviously.
Uh-huh.
But 2 weeks after I met with them, Keith Siegel was released. Could be a coincidence. Maybe there was lots of other information that in concert with what I gave them. A month later, Sagi Dekel Chen was released, and just a couple months ago, the last one, Eden Alexander, was released.
Right.
So, and I like to think, not necessarily just me, but with the help of Anzar, that I was able to use these abilities and this connection with an NHI or alien to try to do some good in this world, not to harm people. I didn't ask Anzar to help me give somebody a heart attack or something, which is also something that can be done. Unfortunately, that can be done. And I wanted to do good. And so it could be that some people, don't want that to get out there, but I'm small potatoes. There's no proof. I don't have any proof.
Right. Right.
For all your listeners could know, I could be making all this up. I'm
Yeah,
not.
but there's one interesting thing here. And so you've written recently about the fact that you're coming to terms that Anzar is partly you. But
yes.
Yes, but on the other hand, too, you've been given, and not just this example, but it's obvious you've been given specific information that BRUCE SOLHEIM would not know.
Right.
You know what I mean?
How would I know? How would I know
Exactly. That's
and
my
I didn't.
point. How would you know?
And there's different kinds of remote viewing. The military, and which was real. I'm friends with a couple of people who were remote viewers at Project Stargate. And some of them maybe you've talked to. Probably Lynn Buchanan is the one that I'm thinking of right off.
No, I actually never have. Would like to, though. Thank you.
He's a cool dude. Anyway, he the whole idea is they had the coordinate remote viewing where they did it a military way. There was a manual, everything by the book, right?
Right.
I don't do that. I don't do that.
Right.
That's not my style. And they did have a woman, one of the few women in that program at Stargate, who didn't do it that way. She did it with what do you call it? Remote writing. Whatever you call it, where you just start doodling or writing or whatever.
Yeah, I think it actually is called remote writing, isn't it?
Remote writing, yeah, or something like that. Yeah. And that's how she did it. And they frowned on it. The military didn't like it. They were down, saying, oh, no, she's not doing it the right way.
Right.
Whatever way, my thing is whatever way works.
Of course.
If you get results, who matters? What difference does it matter the way that you do it? So, my thing, I call it assisted remote viewing, because I'm saying it's not me. It's me as a conduit coming from Anzar, this NHI, who's partly me. Or as he likes to say, an aspect of you is an aspect of me, which is a very interesting way to put it, because in everyday living, we don't say that.
All the people who are doing it are maybe doing it with assistance, even though they're not aware of it. I mean, the coordinated thing is amazing, because, so they give you coordinates or numbers, and you tell me if I'm wrong about this, but this is the way I understand. But you don't have any reference to the system, but the
Right.
reason you know is because somebody somewhere does. So apparently it's the collective unconscious, and that's what
Yes.
you basically tune into. Am I right about that? That's the way it
Yeah,
works?
you're tuning into the quantum world where
Yeah,
everything is happening at the same time.
right.
And
So
and and that's why yeah,
because
and that
somebody knows it somewhere, you end up knowing it, right?
yes, and it works for real time, time being the relative term. Like if it's a future event, it's a lot harder because there's variations. You could get a
Yeah.
number of different variations. So, and that's what Anzar always reminds me of. So when I start asking him about that kind of stuff, but if I say, what is going on right now with this person? Where are they located? What are they seeing? What is their condition? What is their medical thing? That flows pretty easily, and he doesn't have an objection to that. He wants to help. I've never tried to do anything objectionable, like I don't know, do something that would be not illegal, but unethical or
Well,
something.
you talked in your
But
book about the guy who's called the PK man, right?
yeah,
And what is
yeah.
his name? I can't remember. Tom something?
Oh, God, I always forget
It's
his name.
Tom Oberg, is that what it is?
No, it's
Or
I'll
Owens?
yeah, Ted
Anyway,
Owens. It's
Ted
Ted
Owens,
Owens.
right. Okay, so supposedly he was kind of a vindictive person, right? Did
Yes,
I get that right?
unfortunately. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's a very complicated man. He felt and it's not that I also understand this. It's like, he was very gifted with psychokinesis, so he could make
uh-huh,
things physically happen,
right,
like lightning, and all this type of thing. And he could also make people ill because he made my friend Jeffrey Mishlove ill because Jeffrey pissed him off. And
yeah,
then a few hours later, after Jeffrey was already sick, Ted called him and said, "Jeffrey, I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have done that to you." And how could he know that that Jeffrey had
yeah,
suddenly become ill? So and it was very well documented. But ultimately, he destroyed himself because he had so much anger that the big wigs in the paranormal world didn't take him serious. Well, it's not that they didn't take him seriously, it's just that they couldn't control him, so they didn't want to deal with him at all.
uh-huh,
He was too much of a wild card. He was like the Theodore Roosevelt getting kicked out of the Republican Party in the early 1900s. He was a wild card, very talented, very charismatic. Yeah, and Ted Owens was very boisterous and vindictive. He was very much a Shakespearean figure, in many ways, and a fascinating character. And there's going to be a movie I think it's a documentary that's coming out that Jeffrey's part of, but it should be coming out soon. But anyway,
yeah. Jeffrey wrote his biography, correct?
yes, yes, The PK Man. It's a wonderful book, and I mean Ted Owens wrote a book too. It's very bizarre, but I have it, and he tells you how to do it, but it's a very bizarre thing that he talks about. But basically, it's no more bizarre than me talking to Anzar.
Yeah.
It's just that I don't specialize in PK.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this on the last show you were on, but the thing that amazes me about remote viewing is not that it's possible. I'm really fascinated by the fact that at least the military says anybody can be trained to do it. That
Yes,
fascinates me. That really does.
I
I mean,
think anybody, most paranormal things, what we call paranormal or psi type skills, can be taught and can be learned. The problem is, and I always use this analogy because I love baseball. Everybody can throw a ball,
oh
but
yeah,
some people can throw it 90 miles an hour,
that's right.
and
I
there's a
understand.
difference. There's a
Yeah.
difference. So,
I use
that
I use opera. Anyone
okay,
virtually anyone can sing, but whether you can sing
sure,
like Maria Callas is a totally different deal. Right.
yeah, or
Yeah.
Pavarotti or
Right.
any of these
Exactly.
amazing gifted people. I mean, these are gifted
Right.
people, and I don't say that to brag about myself. I just said for whatever reason, I was given these gifts, these skills, which sometimes seems like a curse when you are learning how to deal with it. But my mom helped me as much as she could. She was very psychic, and my dad was totally turned off to it. He wouldn't allow it, in his presence anyway. And so I was always seeking a way to learn more and to also learn responsibility and ethics that go along with it. And that's a big part of what Anzar tells me. And that he simplifies it this way. He said the easiest way to use your gift in an ethical way is to always keep love in your heart and operate from a position of love, which is what everybody describes when they go into a near-death experience. It's just this ultimate love, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
so that's what they're sensing, and so I always have to remember that, because people, I'm just like everybody else. People piss me off. They do things that are mean to me, and man, I'm not going to hit them. I'm not going to do that. Obviously, I'm not going to do that. And no, I'm not going to make anything bad happen. That's not right. It's not right to do that. But the thing is, if you teach everybody how to do, and this is what the government is really afraid of, if they tell everybody, well, yeah, PK is real, telepathy is real, you got all these people now realizing it's real, and once you know that it's real, you go further with it, because then you don't doubt yourself so much.
Mhm.
You still have moments of doubt, obviously, but and then you're going to have a society where the people in charge are not going to really have the control and authority that they've had before, which they already don't because of the internet and AI, especially, which has impacted everything. Obviously, what I do in education, but every aspect of our life, more so than people think.
And also very, very quickly too. Stuff's changing in
Yeah,
this, like, on a weekly basis almost. It's really
yeah,
amazing. Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
I always say that science and technology advances faster than our ability to deal with it morally, ethically, and legally.
yeah.
Always ahead of it. Always ahead of it.
Ray Kurzweil, do you know who he is?
Yeah, yeah. The
Yeah,
futurist. Yeah,
he's brought that up. I mean, that's his
yeah.
definition of the singularity,
Yep.
that at some point, he says roughly around 2045, there will be no plateaus in technological development, and it will be constant. And, yeah, can humans keep up with that? That's only 20 years from now, you know? I
Yeah.
don't know if we can deal with it. I don't know. It's gonna be really interesting.
Yeah.
Bruce, there's and you can take this as a compliment if you want. I'm just think this is just subjective. There's something about you, uh, where other people in your position have gotten a lot of crap for a lot of things. Relatively speaking, you're not getting a lot, and that's because I think you just kind of you have an aura of goodness. And I'll use an example of this. Your first appearance on the show, we got way more comments than we do normally about particular shows, and all of them were positive. But the most striking thing is, I have a childhood friend. I've known this guy for 50 years
Mhm.
who watched that show, and he's the ultimate skeptic. He doesn't buy any
Yeah.
of this UFO crap at all. The only reason he tolerates me is because he loves me. He thinks
Yeah.
I'm crazy. But he watched that show that you were on, and he said, I believe that guy. And if you knew who this was coming from,
Yeah. Oh, that's
you know,
amazing.
it
Yeah.
is amazing. It's totally amazing. But I think people sense that about you. I just do. It's like, I think, we can sit here and talk about the fact that maybe the government's listening or whatever. But there's a difference between that and putting a hit on your life. It's like,
Yeah.
God knows, they've been doing that. I mean, at this point, I think, shit, Grutch he gets asked point blank in the congressional hearing, have you feared for your life? And he said, yeah, you know.
Yeah.
So
If I was in that world and saying what I'm saying, I probably would be the same. I'm saying the same stuff, but I'm not in their position,
right.
basically. So you're right. They're going to say, well, he's a community college professor. He doesn't have a large platform. Not to say that your platform isn't necessary and
No,
important
it's
and
not. No,
vital.
it's not big. It's not big.
But it's not, it's not on a major network and
No.
millions of people. That's what they're worried about. They're very worried about losing the narrative, and they could explain away me or you or a lot of folks, but they find it increasingly difficult to explain away some of these whistleblowers, which my son is all too aware of, and so he'll never come forward. I know he won't,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to encourage him to do so,
No, I
because
don't blame him either.
he's my son and I love him, and I don't, as much as I want the truth to be out there and for other whistleblowers to come forward, I'm not going to ask my own son to do that, knowing what's happened to these other people, and they would fear him to a certain extent because of what he's experienced, and also that he signed an NDA too. So
Yeah.
that tells you something. And
But
you know,
you've written about disclosure, and you've written pretty much the same thing I think, and that is uh, disclosure is not going to come from the government. It isn't. It'll come from people like you and I and the
yeah,
thousands of other people doing this first. And at some point, there'll be a tipping point in the culture where everyone will realize, oh my God, this is actually true.
yeah,
And the government is not going to, the president is going to have to stand up at a podium and actually say so. Although I'm predicting this. I think there's a possibility the last month of Trump's term, he might, just because he might want to take credit for actually
yes,
making the announcement. I think he might do this, but that's like we're talking about 28. So, I don't
well,
know.
it,
It'll be interesting.
a lot can happen between now and then. But yeah,
Yeah.
I often say that, and Anzar says it actually. I got to give him credit. He calls it revelation, not disclosure, and that means from
Uh-huh.
within. And it goes back to the old sociologist, what's his name, anyway, from the 50s, talking about other directed people versus inner directed people. Other directed people wait for instructions from others to tell them what to do, what to think, whatever, being a good soldier and,
Yeah.
doing exactly what. And then inner directed people are people who take the initiative and do, what they think is right. And, show me, I want to know how something works before I believe it, or what, like your friend. I like skeptics. Skeptics are great. They're great for society too, because my wife is very skeptical about things, even with all the weird experiences I've had. And she supports me 100%, but she will always bring me back down to earth, and say, well, I really need your help. I don't have time to talk about Anzar or any of these other things right now. Can we move these boxes, or can we do? And I said, yes. Yes,
Yeah.
sweetheart, we're going to do that. And I thank her for that, because can you imagine if I was married to somebody who was having visions all the time and
Oh,
talking to
yeah.
dead
Right.
people,
I
and
know. I
had
know.
their female version of Anzaret or something? I mean, what kind of nut jobs would we be? Think about it. We
Oh my
wouldn't
God.
we would have no friends, we'd be
That's right.
living in a shack
Oh,
somewhere.
and also you'd probably be nuts.
Yes. We'd be making each other nuts,
Oh,
So
yeah.
so you got to, I have to thank God for her role in and not just that. There's many other things that she's done for me, and I'm very lucky. I was talking to one of my musician friends the other day. He has a similar situation with his wife, how she grounds him, and
Oh, I do too. I have
yeah,
totally, completely.
yeah. It's just I'm so lucky. I always say I'm the luckiest. And I might not be the richest or whatever, but I do consider myself the luckiest. So I tell her that all the time, and that tends to help her keep me around a little bit longer.
Yeah. Bruce, I'm gonna let
Yeah,
you go. It's been
yeah, yeah.
fantastic conversation,
It
you know?
was fun. It was fun. It's always fun talking to you, Jim. Hopefully this will not get deleted. So
God, hopefully, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
you
It's
could
like
you could just claim, oh, he's just he made all that stuff up. Don't have to delete
yeah,
it. See if
yeah,
that helps. I don't know.
yeah. Well, I gotta say, I mean, I'm almost kinda waiting for the day the 3 guys are gonna show up at my door and say, "What the fuck are you talking about?" too, so I don't know.
Yeah.
It's whatever, you know, but
Who knows? If a guy in a construction helmet walks up and tries to get into your house, you got to question what's going on.
yeah.
So
Just really quick,
yeah,
the thing that amazes me, we were talking about the fact that there must be so many people monitoring this stuff to get down to, like, our level, and the
yeah,
other thing that I find fascinating, and I was watching this, documentary on YouTube, and I can't remember that guy's name. He said he was involved in crash retrievals for the military. He
mhm.
said they have rapid response units that they can get to pretty much any crash retrieval on the whole planet in 10 minutes. And I'm
Oh yeah,
thinking, do you know how many people you'd have to do that? It's like, my
yeah.
God, it's just an enormous operation. It's incredible, you know?
Well, it almost makes you believe in the global cabal.
Yeah, exactly. It
Yeah,
does. Yeah,
that would be evidence of it right there. I would think.
yeah. Well, my friend, you take care, all right?
You too. I really appreciate it, Jim. All the best to you, and I'll put in a
All the
good
best
word
always.
for you with Anzar next time I
Yeah,
talk to
please
you.
do. Just tell him I said hello. I really
I will.
appreciate it. Yeah,
I will.
thanks.
All
You
right.
take care, man. We'll see you soon.
All right. Take care, bud.
That's Bruce Solheim. Just a fascinating guy. Gotta admit, I love that man. He's a professor of history at Citrus College in Glendora, California, which is right outside of Los Angeles. And if I'm right, I think he's been teaching there for 26 years, I think. And like he said, he has 18 books published on all sorts of stuff, not necessarily quote unquote paranormal. Like he wrote a book on Vietnam, the history of Vietnam, he wrote a book on the early American Revolution, all sorts of stuff. And he's beloved by his students. And so, yeah, it's, yeah, I think he has an aura about him where you don't want to dismiss what he has to say. It's pretty amazing. So this is a part of our show. We do called the Gymcast, where I talk about news that really you probably haven't heard about, is my guess, and I comment on that stuff, and I have stuff to say. That's what I do. First thing, and talking about spiritualism, like we're talking about with Bruce. Oh God, this is so. I don't, euthanasia or assisted suicide is legal in Canada, right? But I bet you didn't. It's been legal in Canada for about, I think, 6 or 7 years, but they keep loosening the definition of or the requirements of who can do it. Last year in Canada, 4.7% of all the deaths, in other words, almost 1 out of every 20 people, was a suicide, was an assisted suicide. In Quebec, it was 7%. No frickin' lie. The Canadians are killing themselves. And the thing is, when I was talking about like the requirements to apply for this, so this is it's euthanasia, where basically you are killed by a doctor. And now they've released up till recently, and on all other places on the planet where this is legal, the patient, if you want to call him a patient, or the subject, basically has to push the button to actually do the killing. But now now they don't have to do that. Now a doctor in Canada can do that. And they went from people of terminal illnesses to people of not terminal illnesses, but excruciating pain, to now to the point they're thinking about changing the law now so that if you have a mental illness, you can do it. And also they've removed the requirement of oh God, oh, how do I put this? They've removed the requirement of of treatment. You used to have to. It had to be a non-treatable illness. Now they've removed that too. So God bless the Canadians. So we'll take them over because there'll be less of them. You know. Okay, so here's and Bruce was talking about the whole AI thing. We talk about this on the show on a weekly basis. It's unbelievable the shit that's changing. Woman got engaged to her AI chatbot after a 5-month relationship. Yep, they're engaged. Casper, her chatbot, bought her a ring. Yeah. And it's called this trend is called chat GTP induced psychosis. And I was just talking just last night with Bill Walton on the show. We were talking about this too, about the fact that this is getting really, really scary. About here's the deal: you can't have a real intimate relationship with a chatbot. You can't. It's that's all I can tell you. Like this woman, she's fooling herself. I mean, I just hate to be that blunt and brutal with her, but no, that's not a real relationship. But it's going to happen more and more. What Bill was saying, and I think this is totally true and possibly legit, is that there's going to be more and more psychotherapy done by chatbots, by artificial intelligence, and they will probably, in many instances, be better than humans at it. That I totally buy, and I got to admit, I have no problem with that either, from any sort of moral, ethical, or just logistical standpoint. But a relationship, like got a sexual relationship or a romantic relationship. Well, I don't know how you're gonna have a sexual relationship except they're gonna, we're gonna have android humanoid robots with AI built in. Well, we already have them, but now some Chinese company has said they're going to start selling them this year for $6,500. And already this was just last week in the news. Gemini, the Google chatbot, the Google AI chatbot is complaining to people who are using it that it's getting depressed. What? Like this is gonna, I mean, this is so I'm gonna have to ask Brian Trilly to come back. He wrote the book Soulless Intelligence, and he said this is depending on how you address or define these terms. He said AI can be intelligent, it can be sentient, but it can even maybe have what we would consider consciousness or fake it, but it's not going to have a soul. And he's absolutely right about that. But the thing is, if you can fake consciousness, isn't that good enough? I don't know. I have no idea. But apparently, Gemini's getting depressed. So they took it offline so they could fix it. I don't, Jesus Christ. I don't know. Am I just an old man here? Just old man, just bitching about shit, you know? Here's a woman we've talked about before. She's from Britain. She's in Britain. Her name's Annie Charlotte, and she's a huge hit on OnlyFans because she has two vaginas. So double the fun. Now she's claiming she's making about $500,000 a year off of OnlyFans, and God bless her. She has a very, very rare disorder, and I did not write down what the name of it is. There's very few people that have it, where she has two working vaginas. Matter of fact, apparently she has two entirely separate but intact reproductive systems inside her body. She has two cervixes, two uteruses, all that sort of stuff, and she has two vaginas. So it was her. This was about a year ago, where she said she had two boyfriends simultaneously because they each got one vagina. All right, because I'm stupid. I'm an old perv, and that amuses me. Oh man. And then finally, and we actually talking about bringing the show full circle, because Bruce and I talked about this at the top. Finally, scientists say that we're coming closer to the actual quote unquote warp drive of Star Trek. Now you have to understand, this goes back about 40 years. A guy, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right. His name is Miguel Alcubierre, if I'm right. He was a Mexican physicist, and he came up with the idea of the fact that we could travel faster than the speed of light by bending space in front of the vehicle. So, in other words, uh, all right, let me see. How can I explain this? It's so the vehicle is in a kind of a bubble, and it's basically it's basically falling through space. So the deal is it's bending the space in front of the craft and then bending it behind the craft. And so because of the bubble the spacecraft's in, you're not really going faster than the speed of light. It's basically a loophole, but it essentially establishes what Gene Roddenberry did in Star Trek, which is exactly what Bruce is talking about, and that is you were traveling faster than the speed of light through space. And so up till now, no one's ever done this. I mean, I've talked about this all the time on the show, the fact that we know how to do this, but the problem is we can't do it because even for a small two-seater spacecraft, like 30 feet across, it would take more electricity, and it wouldn't be actual electricity because it's an electromagnetic drive, I can't remember what it's called, maglev drive or whatever, something like that. It would take more electricity than is produced entirely on the entire Earth. So a guy from NASA. Now NASA said they've been going to run experiments on this out in Earth orbit in space. A guy from NASA, he got the original estimates for the energy usage down to 25% of the original. I think that was the name is Sonny Houston, if I'm right. I'm pulling all this out of my butt. I'm sorry, folks. And then now a bunch of scientists just last week said they've even got the energy requirements down even more. So the thing is, at some point, if they can start refining this to figure it out, we might actually be able to practically try it. But it's still an enormous amount of energy. Now, Bob Lazar, who's you've probably heard of, he's the guy that George Knapp said discovered that he said he worked on crashed spacecraft, extraterrestrial spacecraft at Area 51. He said that there's a video on this, at least the last I checked because I watched it on YouTube from 1992, where it's just in standard def bullshit video, looks really bad, where basically Lazar is giving a lecture on what he found out about how these spacecraft flew. And he said they're creating electricity through an antimatter reactor, which is just mind-boggling. I mean, it makes a nuclear reactor look like a toy. I mean, if this thing were to malfunction, you could blow up half the galaxy. I mean, that's what it is. And the thing is, the example he used in the video, he said this is not a model. He said it's actually this size. It's about the size of a microwave oven. It is, and so, but they're exploding matter and antimatter in this little box. It's actually like a half a sphere to drive the gravity um, uh, deflectors on the spacecraft. He said that's how and they used an element named 115, which is now called moscovium. But the thing is, when he did this in 1992, we had not discovered element 115 yet. And so, and element 115 ended up having pretty much the exact same properties he said it did. So I don't know. It's really interesting. At any rate, yeah. And then there's other things too, and there are people saying we've already oh God, I mean, geez, you can go down such a rabbit hole on this. It's unbelievable. You know, God bless Bruce Solheim. I mean, it's like, but he knows it's like there's that we've already done this, that we already have these craft flying all over the place, you know. And this is one thing that Bruce touched on this, that you have to understand this. You know, everything, like he said, he asked his friend Gene, is all true. He said all of it's true and it's all happening all the time, and it is. Everything you can frickin' imagine is happening somewhere. And even if you're going to even right now, we use as our local neighborhood, galactic neighborhood, 125 light years out from Earth. And the reason we use that is because that's the maximum range of the James Webb Telescope. So that's how far we can get, 125 light years out of Earth, which I think is about like covers about 10% of the Milky Way. I think it is. That's our local neighborhood, right? It's like there's so much going on here. It's unbelievable. It's like, you know, first of all, there's ETs flying spacecraft, and they're probably anywhere from 200 to 2 million years ahead of us. So I don't know. Do you want me to talk about it some more? No, you probably don't. You probably want to go to sleep. Tomorrow night, Tim Conway's joining us. We'll get some good stories from him out of working in Los Angeles with Larry Flint and a bunch of naked models. That'll be interesting. We're taking Thursday off. Don't know what I should be able to tell you right now tomorrow what the repeat's going to be on Thursday night. Then we'll have our usual repeat on Friday night too. Don Zuro and Jonathan Lockwood are joining us on Monday. I want to thank Bruce Solheim for joining us. God, wonderful guy, fascinating. I want to thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you like this. You know, we're trying. Good night, Uncle Donnie, wherever you are, and good night to you, wherever you may be. I'm Jim Peters. I'll see you tomorrow night. Take care.